On day 10, we'll start chapter 4. We'll have up to day 12 to compose it. Chapter 4 is our first anchor chapter. Anchor chapters follow crisis chapters. Their main goal is to display the consequences of the crisis and to create a continuity in the story. However, the tools we're going to use to display these consequences will, at first glance, not be the obvious. We want to create a fluctuation in the rhythm of the story, where the crisis chapter establishes a tension, the anchor chapter moves the story to the resolution of this tension. And as the characters continue their path to their goal and to the end of the story, they have to meet other characters after having faced the threat. Anchors are the occasion to introduce new environments, new settings. These settings, these environments, have to display changes from previous environments. They don't need necessarily to be new settings and new environments in a literal sense, only in a formulaic sense. The new symbols, the new interactions, the new possibilities are what you want to display through these new environments. Whereas consequences of the crisis should be shown through the environment, they should also be displayed through the character's evolution as well as the story itself. An anchor chapter allows you to present a new setting, a new environment. This environment can be literally a new environment, a place the characters haven't visited before, or it can be an already known environment which has dramatically changed. Now, what's the purpose of the first or the second option? Anchor chapters' main goal is to display the continuity of the story. We are supposed to anchor the story, to make it grounded, more cohesive. Fact is, a literal chapter, a literal new setting, and maybe new literal characters, all these three elements brought together could bring a great sense of continuity, or they can be confusing for the public as well. That's why we said earlier that these tools may not be so obvious to use. So the literal option can be a great option to create surprise. No, it's particularly appropriate because it allows you to create and use new elements. Now, how does it help you to create continuity? Maybe in one of the three crises, whether it's chapter 3, chapter 6, or chapter 9, but it's most likely to be in the climax or in the final crisis. Some characters, some important characters have disappeared, or their alignment has changed. Now you have to replace them. Now, what's the point of creating a new literal setting? It's to replace them by introducing a new setting, a new storyline, a new character. You give yourself the flexibility that you need in this situation of crisis. And the post-crisis context established here is a very consistent one. It's very believable, since if you had to face a loss in this kind of situation, you'd need a new element to perturbate the rhythm of the story and offer your characters new possibilities. That can be brought by enough change in a known setting, because a known setting, an already established setting, can turn new, can be made brand new if you, for example, add a new part to this setting, because there is this hybrid option where your characters return to a setting they knew, but there is a new element inside the setting itself. So the whole of the setting is known, the broad part, but there is one new element inside the setting. Maybe it's a new landmark, created by a new organization. Think about the opportunity that new elements bring you in terms of flexibility and in terms of management of the rhythm. An anchor chapter is meant to display the wish to advance. The characters now have faced a crisis. They have lost something. And the situation of loss may undermine them. Now, they'll need either a new goal, or they'll need to remotivate themselves in order to pursue their actual goal. It will always be the same schema. The characters will need something new to get a new kind of motivation, or they'll need to reignite their existing motivation. So they need new people to help, and these people can be themselves. They may need to help themselves in order to find the motivation to continue, pursue their goal. So this sense of advancement may be inner if the characters need to help their own self or a peer, a member of their group, or it can be outer if the character need an outer source of stimulation, an outer help, a character which they don't know, so in another way, a new character which would need help. Important here is to move forward. And in order to deploy this new effort, because the character, they still have faced this crisis, and if you want to display the consequences of crisis, the best thing to do is to show that your character have lost some form of motivation. Because the crisis was supposed to be painful, so now your character can continue right off the bat. They'll need a place to rest, a place where they can think what they're gonna do, a place from where they can stop and think to look forward. Now, how does it go? Your characters need to ponder on the reason of their defeat or the reason of their success. And if you want to create a really satisfying crisis, you want to mix and match those two. Your characters, once they face the crisis and they solved the problem, they will need to have lost partially and won partially. You get back to the mining town example. Your characters, your protagonist and their team have saved the settlement. They have saved the people of the settlement, but now those people may resent them because they have destroyed the mine. They flooded it. Thing is, every time you can find the right balance of what the characters are supposed to lose and what the characters are supposed to win, or what they can afford to lose and what they will need to continue the story, you always take the right decision. So you really want to think about the characters' needs against their wants at all time. Because once you've established their needs, you know all that the characters are meant to lose. This place, this anchor, this place of rest, this place where the character will have to deploy a new effort because they will need to plan their future. It needs to be a comfortable place, and that's what comfort is meant for here. comfort is meant for more effort. Thing is, your characters need to reconsider their needs. And to reconsider their needs, they need to be safe. They need a shelter in which they can think. They need a sense of physical stability in order to develop the mental stability they need to plan their future properly. How do you create an environment? First, you want to consider the environment's origins, then its inhabitants, the resources available, and on what the environment stands. First thing to define is the origin of the environment. What's the purpose of this environment? Where does it come from? In most cases, this question may appear to apply to man-made environments, man-made settings, and not. Every environment serves a purpose, and being able to define its purpose will indicate you which kind of inhabitants need to populate it, which kind of resources can be found in it, and which kind of structure the environment will have. Now, the word soul here may remind you, because of the subtopics, of the world atmosphere, and it would be a correct assessment. So why use a different word? Well, this word here is used to introduce you to the concept of anthropomorphism, which will be used more extensively from now on. Now, why make use of anthropomorphism to create an environment? First thing you want to generate when it comes to environments is a sense of wholeness, a sense of openness, and more important than the rest, a sense of immersion. Now, how do you make an environment all of these three things? And what's the purpose of combining of these three things? Well, combining wholeness, openness, and immersion when it comes to environments makes them more compelling. And the easiest way to create a compelling environment or make an environment compelling is to give it a soul. So, in the very climate changes, the light influence on its inhabitant, and the management of, well, you know, the colors. You're making here a frame. You're creating the framework for what your world is. This could be the very first environment you're creating, because we're only at the beginning of chapter 4, and making use of these tools was not something obvious, was not something easy till then. Creating characters is something very accessible because of anthropomorphism, and making use of the same tool to create an environment would just make the task far more easier. So let's think about being compelling here. What is the interest of a living thing? A living thing needs a form of home. A living creature needs a home. It needs a territory. But as every living creature needs a territory, they need to share the same territory or adjacent territories, which creates in itself a sense of synergy. Since all your species will share either the same or neighboring territories, they'll need to develop a great synergy. Now, how is this synergy expressed? These creatures will compete or will share, And you can consider that competition is a form of sharing the resources available in your environment. For now, we're gonna just focus on water availability, food availability, and some form of energy. The last kind will be mainly reserved to sentient species and sapient species, because we're really gonna just consider two kinds of physical energies here, heat and electricity. So your creatures, your living creatures, will need resources in order to survive, and territory is the first resource they will need. After that, water, food, and energy if they even need it. Every living creature in your environment has been put there by you. These creatures must serve a purpose inside the environment, as the environment itself serves a purpose. These species can be food for other species. They can be predators. They can be the cyclers of this environment. Whichever specific use you're giving them, they should have one. And depending on their intelligence level, depending on their sentience level, on their sapience level, these inhabitants can even organize a form of global trade in your environment. The wish to organize, because you'll have species that are more likely to create larger organization. The wish, the need, the want to organize themselves into group is the most prevalent property you'll want to consider, because the wish to create organizations will undermine every other criteria. The very fact that you have living organizations, that your species organize themselves, will perturb the use and the collect of resources. Resource gathering depends directly on the structure of your environment. So every environment has an inert structure, and every environment is limited by this inert structure. The inert part of your environment defines its limits. And by limits here, we don't mean barriers, or borders. We really mean the literal physical limits of the environment. If the environment is mainly solid, if the environment is mainly liquid, if the environment is mainly gaseous, mainly plasma, these are state of the matter type of limits. So the limitations of an environment in terms of inert structure will allow a population to build settlement, to build landmarks, and to make use of the landscapes to build these settlements and landmarks. The inert structure, the bed of your environment, determines its mapping and how you will create essentially plans on how to use it and how it can be used in the future. Anchor chapters break the angst, the pain brought by crisis chapter. They're a lot more contemplative. And in order to display this feeling of this contemplation, you have to change slightly the formula of how you expose your scene. The first thing you want to change is the dimension of atmosphere exposition in your scene. The first anchor scene will generally be chapter 4, scene 1. Therefore, we're entering into a new section of our story. A section which is much more focused on the environment, on change and consequences of crisis. So we'll have a new keyword here to use. Fact where we are is more important than who we are with, who we are traveling with. Should indicate a clear shift in the story's balance, in the story's rhythm. Now, as for chapter 1 and 2, we again are focused on the environment. And the environment importance here is displayed by the fact that you treat the environment as a character. Now, the rest of this scene shouldn't change much, except to the point where you want to display certain aspects. For example, here, you want to exacerbate the interdependencies between the different inhabitants of the world. If your characters are, for example, arriving in a new city, in a new town, a new settlement, and they meet new people, these people now should display their interdependency even more than in chapter 1 and 2. Same remark for the second anchor chapter. When it comes to the landscapes and the use of the environment, you want to turn the painful parts to more contemplative and enjoyable part. So, what you want to focus the creation of landscapes, the creation of new environment on, is the experimentation of the immersion. You want to focus on the experience for, again, creating a break in the rhythm. And that may sound counterintuitive because we've established earlier that the encore chapters are supposed to be chapters which arc a form of continuity. But here it is. Your continuity here is a rupture. Last thing for the organization. We haven't talked much about the organization for now, and you want to show. You want to show one thing. You want the organization to display their symbols now. Now, symbols and souls are very similar in nature, since they're both supposed to display the origins and the goal of a due entity. Now, an organization is an entity, and a setting is an entity. So displaying the symbol of an organization will induce in the public's mind, in the character's mind, that the environment you're creating all have a definite symbol. All the new environment you're displaying to them have a definite symbol, and you want to make this symbol obvious. For example, if this new settlement, this new city is situated by a mountain, well, the mountain itself can serve as a symbol, but the mountain can have a quirk, can have a form of specificity. Maybe it's a volcano. Kind of obvious, but maybe there's also a set of river coming off the mountain and just used by the settlement. All these elements, the quirks you're gonna make use of in your environment, you're gonna display through your environment, can serve as a symbol for your new settlement, for your new setting, and for the new organizations which are linked to this setting. Scene 2 shouldn't change much since it is the canon scene model. Up to one point. the fact that you're presenting a new location should have been established already. So insisting on the specific feature of this location would be a good idea. The fact that you're creating a new character would be a good idea also, but again, you don't need to create a literal new location and you don't need to create a literally new character. These are just easier options. These are just clearer options. These are, in most cases, most effective options. In the case of the stakes, there is one thing you want to modify. You want to modify the feeling coming from the scene. You want to modify the emotion coming from the scene. And you want to turn dismay into what we've established earlier, which would be immersion. Now, how do you make your scene more immersive through the stakes? Because making a scene more immersive through the features of the location or the relationships with the character is quite easy. No. The location, you make a description, or you make the characters attach themselves to the location through dialogue. For the characters, same thing. You describe the character to make it more integrated to her environment, or you dialogue with her. Because of problems. Well, now, to make your scene more immersive through the stakes, you combine these two elements. No, you integrate your issue into the location, so your new problem is integral to the location. It is organically linked to it, and it is the problem of this new character you've met. And that's why it's easier to introduce literally new characters and literally new locations, because it creates a sense of novelty which is in itself engaging. So you put your problem in a new place, you integrate it in this place, and you associate this problem with a character which will perceive that enjoyable since it's new. And then comes your resolution. Now, is there anything to change in scene 3? Yes. The outcome. The outcome of an anchor chapter should allow the characters to acquire new resources. And the fact that these resources are acquired in the last scene of the chapter allows you to keep a sense of tension through scene 1 and 2. But at the end of scene 3, and because it is the purpose of Encore chapter, your characters should ground themselves into an environment. They should attach themselves to an environment to some degree. And because they helped someone, because they make use of this environment in order to solve a problem, this attachment will be created here. The fact also that the characters have faced a threat with this new character will reinforce this sense of attachment. The Encore chapters are great chapters to introduce new team members, because they can allow you to integrate these team members through a new adventure, through a new storyline, which maybe wasn't possible before. It allows you to justify the alignment shift which would be caused by the crisis in the precedent chapter. And here, you got a reason to get back to the responsibility principle and explain why your characters are taking the decision they're taking. So we're going, backwards in these chapters. In Encore chapters, you want to think about the outcome first, which should be a fruitful outcome for a character in most cases, because they need to acquire resources in this chapter they need help. So give them help at the end of the chapter. And from there, you get back from outcome to resolution to threat to issue. And from all that, you justify why your characters are following this new path in order to solve their problem.